Good morning, folks. I rather like this lighting, but it's a little macabre. All right, how's that? Oh, blackbird singing in the dead of the night. Oh, I don't know if I should sing much more. Could get a strike for copyright. I don't think I want to say any more than that anyway because I don't think it's very melodious and it's not very recognizable. Okay, my advice when you're watching my videos is to speed them up. They're kind of slow. I leave them at normal speed. I leave them there because I figure there's a purpose in the speed of my voice and the way I'm speaking. Um, and I also realize that a lot of these guys that you listen to and that I listen to speak very quickly and pressure all kinds of stuff. And if you want to know somebody who was really pressure speaker, it would have been Swift. That's what his name was. That's what his voice was. What was his first name? Pastor Swift. I believe he died in about 1970 or 74. I believe he went down to Mexico and he got some food poisoning. I also believe his widow survived until about 2005, 2006. What's so important about Swift? Well, he does present differently. And in the earlier days when I listened to him, he never cited scripture. Um, I didn't think he did. And then I met somebody who spent time with him, and I need to talk with that gentleman on the phone some more again. And he tells me, oh, the guy really knew his scripture quite well. Well, what got him in Wesley Swift, what got him in trouble, and I've got a CD somewhere, pretty much of the complete works of him. It's not very well titled, it's a homemade CD, so I just put it in and let it roll. He used to tell us about things that things in a way that bothered me quite a bit, which made me wonder about him. And one was he kept urging us on to war with the Soviet Union. He knew how many missiles we had and how many they had, and we could easily beat them and take them. And that bothered me. Why did it bother me? Is that because I believed in mutually assured destruction? Or for some reason I wasn't buying into that completely. And also I have to realize and understand, Yahweh's in control of all of this. So if he's really in control, it's like, what the heck does he want us pounding each other with nukes? I don't think so. Has he used nukes on us? Yeah, he has. That's what you don't want to accept. Yahweh has used hellfire and brimstone. He did it on Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighbors. And I know you focus strictly on the act of sodomy and homosexuality, and you think that was their sin. Well, it was a characteristic, it was what made them famous, okay? But if you really want to know their character, then you read the book of Jasher. Mine's still in storage. Now, I've got this new wonderful motorhome. It needs a lot of work. You could pray for me that I get all that work done. Uh, I think I bought a good one. I hope I didn't get a pig in a poke. If I did, well, the the engine's good. The bones are good. My God, I got underneath and I checked, and the shocks were the best you could put on the machine. So I'm making one more modification to the suspension so she doesn't wallow so much around the corners and doesn't porpoise so much. But of course, I'm driving around empty right now with her, so she's not weighted down at all. And I did get a report that one of the airbags started cracking. It's like, it's probably 22 years old. What do you expect? And it's okay. That's okay. I would rather not have, well, if it needs replacing, replace it. And my truck driving friend came by, and I guess I wasn't home. I was picking up oil for the furniture, and he kept on going. And I would have loved for him to have taken a look at it. and given me some guidance, but I guess he came and did his business and left. So uh, he drove a long ways. He could have at least called me on the phone rather than just texted me. For some reason, the text and the sounds don't always get through and get my attention. The other thing is that there's so much clutter, chitter chatter, so much spam. I mean, if I was a judge, and if you happen to know my phone number and call it and got my machine, then you'd know my attitude is towards those telemarketers and all those people. And the judge who gave them permission to do that, the judge who got bought off to let them violate our privacy. There is no right to privacy in the Constitution, or is there? And of course, my take on it is that Roe versus Wade had to go by the wayside, because if it stayed any longer, they were going to have to admit there was a right to privacy, and that their Patriot Acts 1 and 2 or whatever they are, and the acts that those refer to beyond, because it goes like 3 or 4 acts deep. They bury this stuff in the details so that we won't realize what they've sentenced us to. You really need to vote for me for your benevolent dictator president, El Presidente. I think we can turn this around rather quickly. Yeah, I do think Alaska should be its own nation, independent. I think the states should be independent of the federal government. I think Abraham Lincoln was very wrong, and he screwed us up. I know you worship the man, you think he was a great man. I think he was a scoundrel myself. That's my sneaking suspicion, is he was a scoundrel. Then again, we aren't perfect, are we? George Washington, I think he made some mistakes too, but he also called out some incredible wisdom that's timeless. We don't understand the Founding Fathers very well. We don't have the context of our own creation, of our own beginnings. We don't have the proper history down at all. They have muddled everything up. These institutions of higher learning are full of crap. We need to pull the plug on them. We need to make it illegal to fund them. That's right. Don't get me wrong. I think individuals could come together and fund such things. But as far as creating institutions of higher learning and funding them, they have all been taken over. I mean, one of the key features of these universities are the presidents get paid a huge amount of money, and they get picked. The presidents of these universities get picked and chosen and put in there for a reason, and they toe the party line for the masters. It's all centrally controlled. So I don't have the answers to everything. Good heavens, no. But I got some general ideas and general adages. Shouldn't a right to privacy be read into one of the Bill of Rights already? Search and seizure? Isn't it already there? Do we actually have to come up with legislation? Well, we could come up with legislation built upon that, but we have legislation destroying that. That's the problem with most of the legislation, is it destroys the law of the land, destroyed the Constitution. And you think, well, it feels good, it feels right. It reminds me, Edward Bernays' Propaganda, Sigmund Freud's nephew, odd-looking fellow, wrote the book on propaganda, called it Propaganda. They wanted to sell cigarettes to ladies. They also wanted to take over our federal government, so they wanted to sell voting to the ladies. You got to remember, voting was up to the states. There was and is no right to vote. That 19th Amendment is out of order. It needs to go by the wayside. I know you ladies are going to say, you can't take away our right to vote. Yeah, I think we take away that right to vote at a federal level that federalizes the government, and we give it back to the states. The states determine how the locals will be ruling, how they will be voting. That's one of the reasons why we had the Electoral College, because we all had different ways of voting. Some places you couldn't vote unless you were, I think you had to be married, head of household, man. Okay, all right. But he voted for the whole family. He represented the whole family. And of course, you want to destroy the family, so let's put the women at odds with the men. Let's give the women the vote so they can argue with the men at another level, and their vote can negate the vote of the men. I watched it in my grandparents. She voted as a devout Republican, and he voted as a devout Democrat. They didn't talk politics, but they always voted completely differently. By the way, she had the college education, not he. She graduated from Mount Holyoke College in 1917. And you tell me women were oppressed. Well, I mean, fathers, generally speaking, did not want to invest that money in their daughters. Sure, the wealthy did. The real wealthy would send her butt over to Europe and get her educated in a better school than what we had here. Southerners did that more than Northerners. They had the wealth. That's why we fought the Civil War. It was jealousy. As I understand it, the South paid $8 million of the $10 million annual budget to run the federal government back then. 8/10, 80% was on the southern states, and it wasn't fair. So might that not be the real cause of the war, of northern aggression? Yeah, I lived in the South long enough so I know a better way to call it, I think. And of course, people talk about reparations from slavery. Well, the problem is they actually enslaved us all. Look at it. We're working for a worthless piece of money. It's a debt system that we can never pay back. They took away our wealth, and they turned us into a debtor nation, and they made us subject to the whim of those who run the world today, so they can manipulate us and run us. Now, I don't like spending time on Facebook. It's addicting. Facebook is annoying as hell. They should be paying me to be on Facebook, but instead they take my data and sell it elsewhere. It's kind of a tyranny, another dictator system. It's their domain, after all. Private domain? I don't think it should be considered private at all. And I think Congress was totally in error when they gave special dispensations to the electronic dictators, the high-tech dictators, saying they could run it the way they wanted. And I'll tell you something else. I think they're all just extensions of this government. It's hard to say which one goes across the border which way. You aren't free. I'm not free. We're totally controlled. We're enslaved. They're getting kind of worried because they know we're on to them. The problem is we aren't on to them enough that they can't walk the streets yet. They still walk the streets freely. Why is that? Because they have figures in front. They have what we would call the nobility that's out front. The front man, the front woman. Queen Elizabeth was a front woman. Was she the real power? I doubt it. I think the real queen lives in Scottsdale. I think they've hidden themselves. That's how they've been able to do this stuff and take over. I wouldn't be surprised if they were different, not just different bloodlines, but different species, totally different mixes. Actually, different races, but it doesn't show on the surface that well. It might show up in their blood work. It might show up maybe in the structure of their craniums. Or is it cranii? In other words, their skull shape and the number of bones might be different. Matter of fact, it is. And if we look, that skull shape came out of Egypt. And if we look, that skull shape is primarily in Switzerland. Oh, and parts of the southern parts of Germany have that skull shape. And it does have approximately 20 to 25% more brain mass, more cortical matter than the average skull on the planet. They are a different species, not just a different race. They want you to think about race because they don't want you to understand they're another species. We were placed here afterwards and given the dominion. At least the way I read the book, that's the way the story went. It also says we screwed up and they took dominion from us. So how do we get dominion back? Well, if you read the Bible, it says clearly that the dominion belongs to Yahweh. So we get to rule with Yahweh, not against him. Nimrod was a great hunter before the Lord. I'm not so sure we've got that correct. Might it not be more accurate to say Nimrod was a great hunter against the Lord? There are some things encoded and embedded there that are not obvious, and if you're a casual Bible reader, it will not unfold itself to you. Now that I've said that to you, there's a few people on Facebook who do not identify themselves, so I don't know who the hell they are. But they come up with some very interesting charts and very interesting structures, and there's a lot of details. And you've heard the saying, I hope, you've heard the saying that the devil is in the details. They show us this grand conspiracy. And you need to understand that much more is at stake than what you realize. I have told you how many times the earth groans for her saviors. What does that mean? Does the earth have a mouth? Does the earth have a voice? Does the earth have a soul? Is the earth a living being? What about all these other species that exist on the planet, a lot of whom still are here and we think they've gone away extinct? What about the life that's referred to in the Bible on the interior of the earth? Yeah, it does seem to refer to that. I'm open-minded. I'm open to it. Might there not be another world right inside this world? I know it's doubtful. Might there not be more to this earth than it's actually flat and we're walled in by ice? I know it's doubtful. I can point to some evidence that supports that. It's very limited evidence. But I'm open. 1,500 years ago, a civilization was nuked in the Indus Valley over in India. Okay, somebody had nukes 1,500 years ago. That kind of stands out to me. I thought we just recently discovered these things. Really? And Sodom and Gomorrah were nuked. Okay, nukes back then. How many years ago was that? I think that was more than 3,000 years ago. I'm not sure. I have not dated in place when Sodom was nuked. I know there's many lessons in the Bible that are buried in there that we haven't ferreted out and we do not understand. One of them being, don't turn to Egypt and don't turn to Babylon. So we were between a rock and a hard place, or Iraq and Egypt. And of course, what was Babylon? Where was Babylon? Where was Assyria? Where was Persia? One of the things that occurs when you get educated is you find out how much more you don't know. You realize there's a lot more than what you do know. And that's all you do is you keep expanding that area that you don't know. You become more aware of it. You have more questions than you have answers. And when we developed the scientific method, we had the testing of the hypotheses. And I wish I could remember the details of this from university days. But basically, there were assumptions underneath it. And the assumptions were the existence of God. The scientific method wasn't against God. The hypothesis, the way we tested the null hypothesis and come up with that, it assumed God was alive. God is alive. It was built upon that as a truth and a wisdom and as a foundation. I know you all think that it's against religion, against that old stuff, and it's not. It's been so long I can't remember it and detail it to you. I wish I had had a more stable life with a permanent library. I could have all of my books handy and I could turn to those now and could remind myself so I could tell you properly, but I don't. I didn't have that luxury. I was moved around as a child constantly. I can honestly, legitimately say I graduated from my 13th high school. Now, I don't like the instability of that. The instability isn't just implied, it's real. You pick up and you move. You make good friends, you get attached, and then you're separated. And you go through the trauma of losing your friends and being separated. And you get hurt. And you're hurt so badly you don't want to get hurt again. So you go to a new place and you swear, I ain't going to get to know the other person all that well because I got hurt last time. I don't want to get hurt like that anymore. And then finally, after a year or so, your defenses wear down and you make friends and you give in. Then your father gets reassigned. That's what military life was like as an Army brat. And when I was 19, my dad was trying to talk me into going ROTC, getting an education. And I listened to him for about 45 minutes. Then I said, probably the dumbest thing or one of the dumbest things ever in my life. I looked at my dad. I was a smart ass. Didn't realize that at the time, mind you. I wasn't that self-aware. I said, Dad, the way I look at it is I've done almost 20 years and it's time to retire. I'm not getting a retirement. I'm tired of moving around. I didn't want to move around anymore. I remember going back to Newmarket, playing with friends there in the summertime, then having to leave. And I didn't want to leave. We had wonderful gardens back then, the houses. We had it made. We played in these gardens in the yards. Nobody cared where we were all that much. We didn't have a whole bunch of predators out there. We didn't have anybody, well, we did have people grabbing up occasional children. And I remember when I got a little older, the milk carton children, the pictures on the milk cartons. We were only losing 5,000 a year back then. Then it became 50,000. And then we have an FBI fellow who did some investigation and said we lose 800,000 children a year in America. Yeah, we produce a product for somebody, all right. We produce these children, and our system is designed so we give these children up. We don't go after them. We fail to track them down. We fail to investigate these crimes because we're run by a bunch of criminals. That's big business. Matter of fact, it might be bigger than the dope. How big is the dope business? I corresponded with Lyndon LaRouche back when he was alive. He was very much at a genius level. He was out of New Hampshire. His original name was not Lyndon, it was something else, and he changed it to the Red LaRouche. And he was some sort of weird socialist. And he had some ideas that were awkward, to say the least. And he ran for office. But they didn't want him as president. So what did they do? They set his ass up on campaign finance charges. Some phony corporation gave Lyndon LaRouche a bunch of money. And according to the campaign finance laws, if you didn't spend the money or something happened, you had to return the money. Well, the problem was Lyndon was stuck. They had accepted all this money from this organization, and when they went to return it, the organization was kaput. It had been taken apart like it didn't exist, like it never existed. So there was no way for Lyndon LaRouche and his organization to abide by the campaign finance laws. As a result, they imprisoned him for 5 years on a technicality, and they got rid of his competition. Heck, he was probably going to beat Bush. Why did they have to have Bush as their man? Bush was CIA. Bush oversaw the shooting of John F. Kennedy that day in Dealey Plaza. They had to put their man in office and reward him for the work they had done that he had done for them. He had killed not just Kennedy. Looks like he was there at the end of Tesla's life. Not sure about that. He had a nickname, Ice Pick. Why did he get a nickname Ice Pick? Because that was his favorite implement of dispatching his targets, subjects, dare we call them enemies? So he was the supervisor of the CIA that day in Dealey Plaza. And who did he take to work that day? Why, his son, of course. So his son, another future president, could witness history in the making. Among all those settings in Dealey Plaza, among all those Masonic symbols, so they could whack a president and get away with it. And to this day, they've gotten away with it. And who was really behind it? Well, I guess it's more important to say we all killed Kennedy. Everybody stood down. The Supreme Court, Justice Warren, he helped cover it up. He was head of a communist cell on the East Coast. He made decisions about the lives of a lot of men and women. They destroyed a lot of fine people. And the oldest living survivor of the Warren Commission was awarded by being appointed president when Tricky Dicky was fired by Kissinger, called on the carpet by his superior, who just passed away. You go get a book called Thanks for the Memories, and you read that book. I can't read it. I have a copy of it. The invoice was signed by the real author. I didn't know who she was. I thought the real author was Bryce Taylor. It's kind of a fancy name. And here's the crazy thing. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I remember as a little boy, there was a little girl on the Ed Sullivan Show on television who put on kind of a burlesque act but kept her clothes on and did that for the entire nation and said things, salacious things. This child said salacious things, and she might have been 10 or 12 years old. I don't know. I was a rug rat almost. I mean, I had my place on the rug, but in front of the television set, not too far away, somewhere between the couch and the television set. I was a little old to be on the rug, probably. And here this beautiful little girl was out there doing this tantalizing, tantalizing dance. Oh, yeah. There was a tantalizing dance done a long time ago. It's in the Bible. You ought to read. You ought to read it. You ought to read it again. Herodias, I think, was her name. A young girl who danced for Herod, one of the Herods, and it had enticed him so much. And he was so pleased and so happy with this dance that she put on. God only knows what the hell she did. That he offered to give her anything she wanted, to her heart's content, even up to half of his kingdom. And she went to her mother and asked, Mom, what should I ask for? And Mom says, the head of John the Baptist on a silver platter. And this dude, when confronted by this little girl, with her demand on him, on his dumbass, he shuddered at it. He didn't want to do it because the people regarded John the Baptist highly, and he sure as hell didn't need a revolt on his hands. Yeah. And so we have this little girl doing a dance on the Ed Sullivan Show on national television, grabbing the ties of men, saying overly salacious things to their wives like, where did you get this one? You must have gotten this one whatever way. There's more to it than that. You need to read the book, because I'm not going to cover that shit here. I'm just not going to give it that much attention. But I need you to understand that the MK Ultra sex slave program was real and still is real. They haven't stopped any of that shit. They haven't stopped anything they claim they've stopped. There must be a government asset every mile and a half ready to take somebody out. Call them up and give them the job. We are a bloody nation, a bloody people. We are not innocent. Are we ignorant? They sure have kept us ignorant. And I know you're going to say, we didn't know. I didn't know. Well, look, at some point, one has to be responsible. At some point, people have to grow up and become adults. At some point, people have to ask themselves, how did I contribute to this problem I'm having? You see, if they keep you in a victim status, in a victim mentality, you never grow up. You also give up all your power, and you never overcome whatever it is. They keep you innocent, ignorant, and enslaved. The problem is, the way I read the Bible, it says don't major in evil. Don't study the evil. Well, I don't study the evil. I try to follow what it says in the Bible. The problem is that I got blinded. And I see people like Chronic Truther on Facebook and other people digging this stuff up and putting these marvelous charts up, laying it all out so we can understand how grand, how massive, how huge is their conspiracy. And President and the head of the FBI alluded to these groups several times. J. Edgar Hoover said there is a conspiracy so vast, so big, the average man or woman cannot wrap their head around it. I guess even if they wanted to, or they would just be in abject horror if they realized how massive it was. And then Catherine Austin Fitts said, if we ever had a real war on drugs, our retirements would dry up. They'd blow away. Because the country's that dirty that much of our money, drug money, that much of our retirement money is drug money. It's in the drug business. And Lyndon LaRouche wrote a book called Dope Incorporated, the third edition, and I read it. It was in the 90s. And I got a hold of him on email. I says, Lyndon, you need to update this book. You need to give us, and he did update it, and I bought it. He didn't give it to me. I bought it at full price. It was like damn near $30 in paperback at the time, and it sits on my shelf for me to read it someday. But Dope Incorporated Edition 3 told us clearly. It told us which states were growing the most pot. It wasn't New Hampshire. It was Vermont. Vermont's number one cash crop always been dope. It had down the amount of the cash crops, farm commodities of different states, and what percentage of them were from dope. Yeah, and they had to make it illegal because they don't like competition. Now, I'm not an advocate for dope, but the way I see it is they lied to us about it. And they took it away from us, even though it was pretty good for us. Some of us actually need it. The little boys that got seizures, you watch those videos where they put a drop of this oil on the skin and the seizures go away. And you want to put the mother in prison for taking care of her child? That's insanity. You should be very proud of yourself for doing that. The mom is doing what's in the best interest of her child, and you're going to interfere. And then we find out there's cannabinoid receptors throughout the human body. So it was designed to be part of our diets, actually. But we're deprived of it. Why? Does it have some anti-cancer properties, perhaps? Does it lengthen our lives, perhaps? Does it provide us something necessary? And we have the anointing oil in the Bible. And they made that oil up. There was a formula for it. Might not that have been hemp that was the main part of that formed the base of the anointing oil? The oil with which they anointed kings? I don't know. I ask these questions of you. I formed this channel for a couple of reasons. One was so I could learn. I'm not done learning, baby. I know I'm an old man, right? I'm supposed to be a know-it-all. At least I was a know-it-all when I was a kid, according to the rest of the family. And of course, I couldn't know anything. They rebelled against me. It's kind of funny. They had rebelled against the knowledge I brought them. Yeah, I know. Some of the ideas were kind of strange, I guess. Some of them were out there and ahead of their ability to understand. And they resented me, retaliated against me, and held me down. It was a family effort. That's all there was to it. So when I tell you it was a bad family, it was bad for me. It wasn't bad for them. I don't want to go into that. I don't want to hold myself out as a victim. I don't. I try to come up with why did my mother yank me so hard that day in the bank in Bad Nauheim, Germany. And I realize there's a constant weird woman in the background that created a lot of anxiety in my mother, and she yanked me too freaking hard. And I wish Mom was alive. I didn't tell her about the wounds at the end. I don't know if she knows what she did to me or not. I think she does. I think she did know. And what good was it going to do for me to tell her on her deathbed, Mom, you winged me, you hurt me, and ask her, did you know that? So I kept my mouth shut. My mother called me up. Actually, my father called me up and in a gruff voice told me, your mother wants to talk with you. I don't think it's a good idea. I'm glad he said that. I am, because he queued me up. something wasn't right here, or he was worried and concerned. And as a result, I censored myself. I withheld this harsh information from my mother's ears. What good would it do? Nobody's going to put my back together again for me. The wound was permanent. I have a lot of agony because of it. I will die with it. That's all there is to it. I can't help but wonder why that was allowed to happen, why I got no medical attention. And I'll never forget when my sister hammered on my back and jumped up and down. I believe she used her left elbow and hit that shoulder that was protruding, that shoulder blade, as hard as she could, screaming, "Hunchback, hunchback, hunchback." No, my life was no play. It was kind of horrible because of that. I couldn't sit up straight as a result of that, and my dad made the determination that I had a poor attitude. Hell, Dad, I couldn't sit up. Your wife damaged me. And she wasn't fessing up, and you weren't taking me into the hospital for some medical attention that could have helped me, and my body would have developed a lot more normally. Yeah. I didn't start off expecting I was going to reveal this about myself and about my family. I'd love to be able to say it's none of your business. Yet, I realize my life and what I go through and what has happened to me is very symbolic of America. As I walked in to my new mentor's office there, well, at some point, maybe it wasn't the first meeting. Maybe it was later when he got out in his own office. And he told me I needed to develop a delayed sense of gratification. America is going to need to develop a delayed sense of gratification. It's required for you to be an adult, for you to manage yourself, for you to handle yourself, and for you to make the transition to becoming America finally. You have to develop a sense of delayed gratification. You have to delay getting a reward. You cannot go take it. It's like in the Bible, it says they took among them all that they wanted for wives. They took them for wives. And as my friend who was a teacher pointed out, you don't take a woman to wife. She's given in marriage, not taken in marriage. That's the principle. That's the biblical principle. I got a friend. Her daughter was so beautiful. She was proud of her daughter. She couldn't wait till I met her daughter. She was beautiful herself. Boy, was her daughter beautiful. But she didn't say much. And of course it's like, well, she's the perfect woman. She's beautiful, she looks beautiful, and she doesn't say anything. What more could you ask for? Well, it would have been nice to know what was really going on in her brain. It would have been nice to really share. And she was outrageously beautiful. And I did what I could do. I knew the mother wanted some help for her daughter. I think she was trying to set me up with her daughter. Her husband didn't approve, just was kind of dumbfounded by it. I gave her the best advice I could give that young woman. She did not take it. I told her to build a relationship with her stepfather and tell him, get me a husband. I told her, he'll do it for you. He'll pick you out a good one. He'll be glad to do that. And your mother will be happy too. Tell him to get you a husband. She was silent. She wanted to control her own life. And she just didn't have the wherewithal to come up with the right stuff. She was unfulfilled. I'm not going to go into more details than that. I threatened Roger last week if he didn't shape up, I was going to marry his stepdaughter and become his stepson. We both had a good laugh at that because I just couldn't imagine calling him dad. Oh, my God. If that was the case, I'd be laughing the rest of my life. He would be too. He's got one of the best sense of humors I've ever heard in my life. I mean, it's not to say he's always cheery, but we know we've got some pretty hard stuff going on today. Can we save the nation? Oh, hell no, we can't save the nation. It's gone. I got a friend whose daughter has told me it's hopeless. Give up on it. I'm sorry, babe. I mean, I still got to raise my voice. I'm not going to get very far, but there's some people are going to hear what I say, and some people are going to come out of the cities, and some people are going to be, well, they might just survive into the next Earth age. Cool. Good people surviving. That's important. I always was going to write a book. I never could get the stability to do that. Some people wanted me to write a book on the cluster A personality disorders, and I can't even remember what those are. They're the difficult ones. At least that's what they thought. They were difficult. Hell, I had been working with people in personality disorders for so long in order to get to schizophrenias. Yeah, that's how I treated them. I conceptualized differently and I worked overtime, probably 20 times harder than the average therapist, because I took the personalities apart and I found out which ones could be shored up the easiest, which were going to be the easiest on the client. Why? Because I wanted the client to have some success. I knew if the client had a little bit of progress, a little taste of success, they would get turned on by it. It would motivate them, and they would do some amazing changes after that. Yeah, I read a book on schizophrenia by a schizophrenic guy out of Seattle. Weird dude. Says there's only 3 ways to become a schizophrenic. I bought 2 copies of his book on how to become a schizophrenic. One copy I highlighted up, I dog-eared it, I marked it up. The other copy I kept pristine. And he told me what it was about. You see, when you listen to a man, when you listen to a woman, they will tell you what they're about. It was true for me in therapy as well, where I had revealed stuff that gave this psychologist, this liberal psychologist, an odd impression of me, and he confronted me with that as gingerly as he could. And what he said was so bad and so disturbing that it kind of pissed me off. And I realized this son of a bitch has no respect for me and he doesn't think much of me. And he's just reduced me. That's when I realized I probably actually realized it before then, the negative projective process that modern psychology is, whereby we hurt the other person, we make them dependent upon us, we lord it over them. What a stupid bunch of imbeciles we are, educated way beyond our means, thinking we know it all, lording it over others. What made me good? I didn't take charge. I didn't take responsibility. I just made sure that the poor individual in front of me got some relief, and they took charge, and they took responsibility. Why? I don't want them dependent upon me. They didn't have to keep coming back and seeing me and paying me a lot of money. Oh, hell no. I wanted my clients so independent they didn't just walk away from me. I wanted them running, sprinting, not avoiding me, mind you, but I wanted them on their own, under their own power, their own strength. Hell, they didn't need to keep coming back to me. It cost too much money for that shit. Was I worth it? Well, if you had to have the help, yeah, it was worth it. I mean, at the end of a year, typically, my schizophrenic clients were on half the medicines. They were living better lives, much more fulfilling lives. All because I was bare bones honest with them. I had one guy come into my office on a court order. I didn't like him. He didn't like me. So how did I get a rapport going? I was dead bones honest. And I told him, you and I are stuck with each other. He liked that. He trusted me. And twice they gave him the wrong frickin' medicine, and the second time they caught it. Thank God the social, well, whatever she was. I remember her name and the trouble she caused me more than I do her position, but she actually caught it. Or maybe one of the others. We found out that the medicines had similar names, and they gave him the wrong stuff, and the medicine that he was used to taking had a hell of a withdrawal, and the withdrawal was so bad that violence was an offshoot of it. My God, did he get ugly. He was such a gentleman. He was a big dude, man. He was big and strong. He was a hard worker. Gave me grief all the time because I was cheap. I wasn't making much money. And he was doing a good job on the car. I don't think my cars have ever been detailed so well as what he did. I know. I exploited the client, right? He got to working. He felt good about himself. And he got himself a girlfriend. Hell, I didn't even have a girlfriend. He was more successful than I was. He was happy. He was a happy camper. He was doing just fine. Now, I miss those days. Some of those times were kind of wild and kind of scary when I had a hot one going on and they turned into me. John, we got to get him to the state hospital. Can you help us? And, yeah, sure. I had this uncanny ability to get a rapport going with these poor folks. I had been trained up in some alternative modalities and highly trained in those. And I was able to somehow establish rapport over the distance. And these clients, they knew what I was doing. They knew what I was about. And people would turn to me, what are you doing? I says, just wait. They'll go when they're ready. Just wait. Give them some time. And they would go around the other people in the day treatment and do what they had to do. And then they'd get in the vehicle and ride off. I didn't like doing that either, but it was like they needed to go in. And I could get the rapport. And then I had a woman one time. My boss pops his head in my office and says, John, would you mind sitting with this lady for a while for me? It was court-ordered examination. He says, I just can't quite put my finger on this one. I just can't quite. Well, she was locked up. She was so pissed off and angry. She couldn't talk. So I put her in the easy chair there in the corner of the office, and I just decided let her sit, and we'd talk a little bit, and I'd shuffle the papers around or books around and attend to whatever I had to do. And she would, her tongue gradually got untangled. She was fit to be tied. She was so angry. Her children had set her ass up to commit her and take over her entire estate because she was a wealthy northerner. She was a wealthy Yankee. And of course, there I was, super Yankee, working in the deep South. An outsider. And gradually, I took a guess as to what was going on, and my hunches were pretty good. And she stammered out and let me know, yeah, I was guessing right. And of course, I was like, okay, great. And then gradually she was able to express herself and let me know how mad she was and how they had set her up and dragged her down there to purposely commit her so that her daughter and her son-in-law, or was it the other way around? No, it wasn't her daughter. Mississippi queens don't like leaving the state. You marry a Mississippi girl, you're going to stay your ass there. They don't like leaving. Yeah, I know. Mississippi used to have, used to produce probably more Miss Americas than any other state. Wow. Some of the beautiful women that come out of that state. Whew. I mean, just really beautiful. And it was an interesting group to work for. They trained me. People trained me really well. It's funny as could be. I'm there to help them. They helped me. I did family systems therapy. I had some very interesting clients, some interesting family structures. I busted my ass for them. I did my best to help them and get them moving on. And there were some odd situations, and I was naive in a lot of those. Yeah, they mix it up down there like you hear. Some of the stories you hear are quite true. Unfortunately, it's the same way around the whole country, and the rest of you just aren't in reality as much. Well, the Nile isn't exactly a river in Egypt, you know. Oh, America, you got to wake up, smell the coffee, smell the roses, get stuck by a thorn or two. Yeah, I remember her real well. You need to understand something. The life we have is kind of miraculous and marvelous. It's like we're in between two different zones. It's amazing we exist at all. But yet we're here. And I know that there's more space in between the atoms than there is substance here. So it's like we always ask, what am I? Who am I? Unfortunately, as children, at least when I grew up, we got to do it kind of naturally, normally, innocently. And now we're forcing the children to watch this weird shit. So they really question themselves. They really are disturbed by that stuff. And you people who think you're adults out there think it's okay. I'm sorry. I saw a horrible vision in November of 1986. And if that comes true, the trash is going to be taken out. I almost don't want to be here for that one. Yeah, it was that bad. Yeah, pretty bad. But that's my weight, that's my burden to carry. Why do I share it with you? Because we need to take out the trash. We need to take care of our own business. America truly, to save the world, to save the planet, Americans need to turn inward. We have to learn to get along with each other here at home. We have to learn how to become free people. We have to learn how to limit our government, that horrible monster that we've allowed to rear its ugly head across the whole planet. Or should I say, ugly heads. America, where are you now? Don't you care about your sons and daughters? May Yahweh bless. This is number 152.